He never asked for money. He never threatened her. He simply told her it was God's will. For years, Victor Lamb was the trusted church deacon and spiritual advisor to 86-year-old Gloria Hensley. Then one day, Gloria signed away her entire $2.6 million estate, believing she was making a final gift to God. Her devoted daughter, Diane, was left with nothing. It looked like an act of faith, but inside the courtroom, investigators uncovered a devastating secret. The charitable fund Gloria trusted wasn't controlled by the church at all. It was controlled by the very man who convinced her to sign. Stay with us until the very end, because today's story proves that the most dangerous fraud doesn't always hide behind greed. Sometimes it hides behind faith, where trust becomes the easiest path to stealing everything. Gloria Hensley was 86 years old and had been a devoted member of her church community in Charlotte, North Carolina for over 50 years. She had worked as a school librarian for 30 years before retiring and had spent her remaining decades engaged in her faith, her garden, and her family. Her late husband had left her financially comfortable, and decades of careful management had grown that comfort into an estate valued at $2.6 million, including her home, 2 investment accounts, and a savings portfolio she had never touched unnecessarily. Her daughter, Diane, 51, had been her closest companion since her father passed in 2014. Diane managed Gloria's medical appointments, visited several times a week, and maintained a warm and open relationship with a mother she deeply admired. Gloria's faith had always been a central part of her life, and Diane had grown up respecting that faith even as she maintained her own more private relationship with it. She had never had reason to question what her mother's church community meant to her. Victor Lamb had been a deacon at Gloria's church for 11 years. He was soft-spoken, attentive during services, and had developed a particular talent for pastoral visits with the congregation's elderly members. He brought communion to those who could not attend services, sat with the bereaved, and had earned a reputation among the congregation as someone who genuinely cared about the spiritual well-being of those in his care. Gloria had come to rely on his visits more and more in the years following her husband's death, often describing him to Diane as one of the few people who truly understood what she was going through. What Diane did not know was that Victor had established a private charitable fund in 2019, registered under a name that sounded affiliated with the church, but was entirely independent of it. The fund had its own bank accounts, its own tax identification number, and a board of directors consisting of Victor himself and 2 individuals Diane would later discover were his brother-in-law and a longtime personal friend. The church's senior pastor and its finance committee had no knowledge of the fund's existence. Victor had never disclosed it to church leadership. Beginning in 2020, Victor began weaving a consistent narrative into his visits with Gloria. He spoke about the importance of legacy giving. He described the peace that came from knowing one's earthly resources would continue serving God's work after one was gone. He brought Gloria literature about charitable estate planning, framing it as something the church encouraged its senior members to consider. He told her that the most meaningful gift a person could make was not what they gave during their lifetime, but what they chose to leave behind. Gloria was a woman of genuine faith. She believed deeply in the church community that had sustained her through her husband's death and through the quiet loneliness of her final years. Victor's words did not feel like manipulation to her. They felt like spiritual guidance from someone she trusted. In the spring of 2021, Victor presented Gloria with a charitable gift agreement directing her entire estate to the fund he controlled. He described it as the church's legacy giving program. He told her it would be administered by a dedicated committee committed to extending the church's mission for generations. He told her signing it would be one of the most meaningful acts of her life. Gloria signed the document on a Tuesday afternoon.
Victor had a notary present. Diane was not informed. Gloria passed away in March of 2022. When Diane met with the estate attorney, she was told the entirety of her mother's estate had been directed to a charitable fund and that she had no claim under the bequest agreement.
Diane had never heard of the fund. She asked the attorney for its full registered name and contact information. When she called the church to ask about it, the pastor told her he had no knowledge of any fund by that name associated with the congregation. Diane retained attorney Karen Wells, a probate and fraud litigator in Charlotte with 18 years of experience. Karen obtained the fund's registration documents within days and discovered immediately that the church was not listed anywhere in its organizational structure. She obtained the fund's bank records through a court order and found that the accounts had been opened in 2019, that no distributions had ever been made to the church or any charitable organization, and that Victor Lamb was the sole signatory on every account. Karen also obtained records from the church's finance committee, confirming they had never approved, discussed, or been informed of the fund. The senior pastor provided a sworn statement that Victor had never disclosed the fund's existence during his 11 years as a deacon, and that its creation and operation were entirely outside any authorized church activity. Karen then traced the fund's expenditures. In the months following Gloria's death, the fund had received the transferred estate assets and had immediately begun dispersing funds. A home renovation contractor for work done at Victor's personal residence, a wire transfer to an investment account registered to Victor's wife, a series of cash withdrawals in amounts below standard reporting thresholds collected over several weeks. Of the $2.6 million Gloria had believed she was giving to God, approximately $40,000 had been directed to anything that could be described as charitable in nature. The hearing was held before the Honorable Judge Michael Hayes at the Mecklenburg County Superior Court. Karen Wells presented the fund's registration documents, the bank records, the expenditure analysis, and the sworn statements from the church pastor and finance committee. She called the pastor to testify, who told the court in clear and measured terms that what Victor had created had no connection to the church, had never been authorized by the church, and had used the church's name and reputation to deceive a vulnerable elderly woman into signing away everything she owned. Karen then traced the fund's expenditures. In the 18 months following Gloria's death, the fund had received the transferred estate assets and had immediately begun dispersing funds. A home renovation contractor for work done at Victor's personal residence, a wire transfer to an investment account registered to Victor's wife, a series of cash withdrawals in amounts below standard reporting thresholds collected over several weeks. Of the $2.6 million Gloria had believed she was giving to God, approximately $40,000 had been directed to anything that could be described as charitable in nature. The hearing was held before the Honorable Judge Michael Hayes at the Mecklenburg County Superior Court. Karen Wells presented the fund's registration documents, the bank records, the expenditure analysis, and the sworn statements from the church pastor and finance committee. She called the pastor to testify, who told the court in clear and measured terms that what Victor had created had no connection to the church, had never been authorized by the church, and had used the church's name and reputation to deceive a vulnerable elderly woman into signing away everything she owned. Karen then called a forensic financial analyst who walked the court through every disbursement from the fund following the estate transfer, tracing each payment to Victor's personal benefit and demonstrating that the fund had never operated as a charitable organization in any meaningful sense from the moment of its creation.
Victor's attorney argued that Gloria had made a free and informed spiritual decision, and that the fund, while independent, had been established with genuine charitable intentions that had not yet been fully realized at the time of the proceedings. Karen Wells asked the court to consider what genuine charitable intentions looked like when $40,000 out of $2.6 million had reached any charitable purpose in the 18 months since the estate transferred, while the remainder had paid for home renovations, investment accounts, and cash withdrawals collected below reporting limits. Judge Michael Hayes ruled the charitable gift agreement invalid, finding that it had been procured through deliberate misrepresentation of the fund's nature, its relationship to the church, and its intended use. He voided the bequest and ordered the estate restored to Diane as the rightful heir under Gloria's previous will. He referred Victor Lamb to the Mecklenburg County District Attorney for elder financial exploitation, fraud, and criminal misuse of a charitable organization. Victor was subsequently removed from his position at the church by the congregation's governing board. He was convicted on all criminal counts and sentenced to 7 years in North Carolina State Prison. The fund was dissolved by court order, and all remaining assets were returned to the estate. Diane Hensley settled her mother's estate quietly over the following year. She made a genuine donation to her mother's church in Gloria's name, directed specifically to the congregation's actual benevolence fund, the one that fed families in need every Thursday evening, the one her mother had volunteered at for 11 years. She said it was what her mother had actually meant to do. Gloria Hensley spent her life in genuine faith. She gave generously because she believed in something real. A man she trusted used that belief to construct something false and dressed it in the language of her deepest convictions. The court confirmed that faith is not a contract of surrender, and the woman who had tried to leave the world better than she found it had her legacy returned to the daughter who had always known what it was worth. Would you know how to verify a charitable fund before signing anything in its favor? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story moved you, subscribe to Court of Shadows for more courtroom drama stories every week.